This is To Help You Heal, and I'm your host, Marie Monville. We are going to spend 10 minutes talking about healing. What kind of healing do you need? Is it in your mindset? Is it emotional healing? Is it spiritual healing? You know, there's a lot of healing that we all need, and this is where you're going to find it every week, 10 minutes on Tuesday. I'm so glad you're spending this time with me. Welcome back to this week's episode of To Help You Heal. We are on episode 55, and this week I want to talk about how to walk with hope when we're facing hard things. I was listening to Father Mike Schmidt's Bible in a Year, and I was on day 191 over the weekend. And at the end of the Bible reading, if you haven't listened to his podcast before, he prays. And the words that he spoke in his prayer felt really powerful to me and so grounded in the truth that we all need that for me, I knew right then in that moment that was exactly what we were going to talk about on the podcast this week. Because he talks about the fact that through God, we have hope even when we're walking out hard things. You know, when we're going through circumstances that seem dark, when we're facing something that feels overwhelming, we can walk with hope because of who God is. But, you know, if we want to walk with hope, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's how we're treating ourselves, what we're expecting this situation to look like. Are we allowing fear to be the dominant voice in our head? There's so much that happens when we're going through these difficult places and so much that we have to be aware of as we're trying to walk with hope that I want to dig into that because you know, if you follow me on social media, you probably saw yesterday I talked about having an emergency preparedness plan. You know, this personal plan that we know we can lean into and use right when we need it. And I don't know if this happened to you when you were a kid, but when I was a kid in school, whenever they would do their fire safety week, they would always have us, especially in elementary school, write down a plan of how we would get out of our house if there was a fire. You know, you knew it in advance. And they always said, you need to know this plan before you need it. And you probably won't ever need it, but you need to know it just in case. And I think, you know, that's really the basis for when we talk about peer pressure with our kids, you know, telling them, hey, look, there are going to be decisions that you have to make, and you need to make them ahead of time before you get into the situation, before you're in the moment when someone is pressuring to you to make a decision. You've got to know which way you want to go because it's too hard in the moment when you're facing that circumstance or that choice. It's too hard to lean into that place that you'd want to be outside of that scenario. And so that is really this aspect of saying, what is our emergency preparedness plan? How are we preparing in advance for the days that are going to be hard? Do we know the mechanisms or the structures by which we need to walk this out to keep us in a good place? Because the reality is we're all going to face hard days. We're all going to go through difficult circumstances. You know, whether that's someone that we love getting a diagnosis that's really difficult, whether that's financial difficulties, you know, relational, job, whatever it is, we are all going to walk out these hard things, and we are so much better prepared if we're prepared. So let's talk about that. And let's talk about it from all sides. You know, a spiritual aspect, let's talk about it from the physical, the mental, the emotional well being. All of those things really tie in. So, what is your emergency preparedness plan? And, you know, I think it's okay if you've never thought about this concept before. We're going to lay it all out. I'm going to tell you about my emergency preparedness plan, and you can jot yourself some thoughts and know exactly what you want to do for yourself as well. You know, when it comes to the physical side, let's talk about that first. I know that when I'm going through hard things, I'm an introvert and I am not going to want to talk about it with a lot of people. Introverts, we get our energy usually from being by ourselves. So I know that I'm going to need some processing time alone. If you're an extrovert, you get energy from being with other people. So you might actually rather have some people to talk to, someone to dialogue it with. And I'm not saying I don't want to talk to anybody, but you know, one or two people for me is good. If you're an extrovert, you just might like to be out with people that might make you feel better. So I think we can start there. We can say, do I want to process things more one-on-one or by myself? Or is it better for me to be with people? And then it's also knowing what are some activities that are going to help me. Because I think when we get in these situations that are hard, our brain can move so fast down the road ahead of us, anticipating how bad it's going to be, kind of jumping to the worst case scenario, imagining all of the hardship we're going to face, thinking about how nothing's ever going to be the same as it is now. It's easy for our brain to grab onto these things, using our emotional processing center and our long range decision making center kind of in tandem to give us all those bad outcomes that could possibly exist. And I think, most of the time we know that those things don't happen, but we can feel so much fear and anxiety just because our brain already went there. We need to know how to dial it down. So, what are the strategies that help you quiet your brain? I've talked before in the podcast about the way our brain works, that generally only one area is in control at a time. And if we want to silence the emotional center and our long range decision making center, we have to fire up some other area of our brain. And the easiest one to do that with is by doing a low level activity, something that you don't really have to think about. For me, I love taking a walk. That really helps me to process the thoughts in my head without being overly emotional, just to have that space. Maybe it's in the shower. Maybe you always get your good ideas in the shower. And so that for you, you probably need to take a shower to get a little clarity, have a different perspective. I also love to take a drive in my car, turn the radio up really loud so that I can almost feel it in my chest, allow somebody else's words to wash over me. I have a couple worship playlists that are really meaningful to me and help me move out of those places where I'm just so caught in the emotion. But sometimes we are in the setting, we're in the midst of the circumstance that's hard, and we're not going to be able to go take a walk, or we're not going to be able to get in our car and take a drive. So we need some tools and things that we can use right there in the moment to help us. And one of the things, I've talked about this one before too, but it's my go-to: box breathing. The thing about box breathing is you can be doing this while you're feeling emotional, sitting in a room right across the table from somebody else, having a conversation with them. So you decide, okay, how many numbers do I want to count to when I'm breathing in? So if I'm just doing box breathing any old day of the week just to help dial down stress or, get my brain in a good place, I might just do a count of 4. So that would be breathing in for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding for 4. But if I'm really emotionally supercharged, I know 4 is probably not going to be enough. I don't count super slowly all the time. And I think sometimes if I'm feeling stressed, I count more quickly. So I know that I'm going to probably need to do 5 or 6. But I also know that it's difficult for our brain to be processing numbers and breathing and still feel all that emotion. So I'm going to use that to my advantage. And instead of just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I might count by 5s: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Or I might count by 3s: 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Something that's going to challenge my brain a bit more to stay on track. I might go up one time, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I might go down on the next count: 15, 12, 9, 6, 3. Something that's going to make my brain have to focus on those numbers. If I'm really struggling to hold on to my emotions, that's what I'm going to do to keep myself in a good place. I know the things that are in my in my emergency preparedness toolkit. I know that these things are important. They really help me. What are the things that help you? Have you ever worked through some of these things before? If you haven't, you are welcome to steal my ideas. Figure out if taking a walk helps you. If you have the ability, the next time you're feeling some stress or you're in a difficult place, take a walk. See if that works for you. Take a drive in your car. Turn the radio up loud with some of your favorite music. Do some box breathing. Try those things and see if they help you. And then let's talk about it from a spiritual aspect. How do we walk by faith in these places of having hope, even when we're not seeing the way through? And I think, one of the things that I really try to lean into, and this is a learned practice because it's not my natural perspective, is to praise God in the midst of the thing for all that he's already doing, for all that he's already done, and everything I have yet to see. And, for me, when I think about this, I think about David. And that's what I feel like the Psalms are really all about. David starts out a psalm talking about the hard place that he's in. He's broken, whatever's happening in his world. And then he starts to remember who God is. And so he praises him. And by the end of the psalm, he's feeling completely different about his circumstances than he was at the beginning. And to me, that's what happens when I start reminding myself and declaring and praising God for who he is and for what he's already done. Reminding myself that I can have hope, that I am not without hope because God is in this. And that as much as I'm good at coming up with bad outcomes, God is even better at walking the story out. And he doesn't need me to know everything that's going on or how it's all going to work. I just need to trust him. I need to be able to say, God, you've brought me this far. You're not going to let me down now. God, I see the things that you've done in the past in my life in places where I wouldn't have thought that you could turn this around this way. And I'm going to choose to believe that you're doing that here, even when I can't see it. And I'm going to purpose myself to look for you and your good in every step of this journey. And then I think it is doing that thing. It's looking for the good. It's finding him. It's saying, okay, I'm going to find something today, at least one thing that was good, something that was God, because we have to actually do it. We can't just tell ourselves we're going to do these things. We have to start doing it. So even if you're not going through a hard situation right now, I want you to practice that, to at least practice. I'm going to look for God. I'm going to look for his good in every moment of my life right now. And I'm going to find at least one thing at the end of the day that I can say, this was good. This was God. And that's the reality of it. It's not really that complicated. My emergency preparedness toolkit is pretty simple. I also prioritize sleep when I can. I know that if I'm feeling a lot of stress, I'm probably going to wake up during the night. Generally, if we are waking up, especially maybe like 4 hours into our sleep, that's an evidence that we have a higher stress level going on. The cortisol hormone, it can really mess with our sleep. So I know that if I'm waking up during the night, it's a stress thing. So I know that I can't just grab my phone. I need to do some box breathing, pray a prayer, recite some scripture, do something that's going to keep my brain from wandering off on its own. Because if I let it wander down its own dark road in the middle of the night, I'm probably not ever going to get it back on track, and then I'm just going to be up. So I know the strategies that I try to use during the night, but I also know that sometimes I'm not going to go back to sleep, and maybe I am just going to pray about it and talk to the Lord and try to be restful. So then I know that during the day, if I'm tired, there are some things I need to do for myself. I need to try to drink water, really make sure that I'm getting those ounces in. I need to prioritize the things that I'm eating. If I'm in a heightened state of stress, if there's a lot of really heavy things going on, I don't usually feel like eating. But what I do eat, I try to make sure that it's protein and some veggies, because I know that my body needs that, even when maybe I've scaled it back a little bit. And I'm all about caffeine, so you better believe I'm going to get some quality caffeine in there. Because as much as I don't want to rely on caffeine per se, I know that I'm going to need some energy and I'm going to need some clarity. And so when all else fails, I'm going to get some good coffee and just try to enjoy that, enjoying the simple things. So I want to challenge you to think about, what's your emergency preparedness toolkit? Do you need people? Do you just need one person? What does that look like? What are the strategies you can use to help reset yourself? A walk, a ride in your car, doing some box breathing? Are you aware of the fact that you need to praise God in the moment? Are you practicing that? Are you looking for the good, looking for things that were him? And then what are you doing in the physical sense? How are you taking care of your body? And how are you giving yourself grace for this? Because, it's not all going to be perfect. And maybe you're going to feel like you didn't get the sleep that you wanted. But I know for me, I can either go through the day thinking, oh, I didn't get enough sleep, or saying, you know what, God, I'm going to do my best and you're going to meet me here and we're going to get through this thing. So I hope that these things have been helpful for you. I hope that you will work on your own emergency preparedness toolkit. I'm going to talk about this more in my email newsletter this week. Are you on the list? If you're not, you can look for that link right here in the show notes. Do you follow me on social media? That's where I always talk about the episodes and give some other tips for practical application of walking out life, partnering with God in this place of using the tools and the resources we have available. I'll pop those links in the show notes too. So come on back next week. We're going to continue working on things that help us, help our lives, and help us find the Lord. I'll see you then.